These are things that I do and don't want to happen in James Gunn's Superman movie releasing next year. First of all, this film cannot have the dark and gritty tone that the Man of Steel of the DCEU had, because I could not stand Zack Snyder's almost grim dark take on the DC characters, especially Superman. It just did not fit at all in my opinion, and I'm not really worried about James Gunn doing that. What I am kind of worried that James Gunn is going to do is make the tone also a little too silly and goofy, leaning way into the humor and trying to make it just feel like another version of the Guardians of the Galaxy or the Suicide Squad. Listen, I love both of these movies. I think they're some of the best superhero movies of the last 10 years. I think James Gunn is honestly a great writer, and the way he can direct comedy works so well. I just don't think this Superman movie needs to lean into that. And I know you're probably thinking after that, well, what on earth do you want the tone of this movie to feel like then? And the only way I can describe it is I think it should be lighthearted yet sincere, meaning it's not undermining itself with goofy jokes or anything, but also not taking itself too seriously. Instead, just give us a nice, uplifting, and heartwarming story about Superman and the people in his life and the people that he's saving, because that's kind of what I want to see out of a superhero movie. I want to feel inspired. I want to just feel happy at the end of the day. I truly think that's the perfect way for this movie to strike a balance that makes it feel truly unique in the superhero genre, because you have things like the MCU that have been way too goofy and just not taking their own movies serious anymore. Something like Thor Love and Thunder comes to mind. There's really serious moments in the movie, but it doesn't even feel like it. Then you have another DC project in the Batman and that whole universe, and I think that is an amazing movie, but that's obviously a lot more darker and super serious. And yes, it does have some uplifting moments towards the end, but it's definitely something on the darker side. It just keeps bringing me back to the word sincerity, because I think that is the perfect way to describe what this movie needs to be. Take yourself seriously and respect the audience, but not something that's super dark and gritty. Kind of leads me right into the next point, is that I think this movie needs to heavily focus in on the Superman and Lois Lane love story, so much so that it should almost feel like an action romance movie. Now, I'm not asking for like the Notebook or anything like that in this film, because you do not want to get me on a tangent about the Notebook. I think that is an incredibly overrated movie, but I do think in order to succeed, this movie really needs to highlight this relationship. Again, this is just another way to really make it stand out as its own unique thing versus other superhero movies, because it seems like the superhero genre is just so afraid of having sincere and real relationships represented on screen. Like, as much as comic book fans probably don't want to admit it, love stories are really at the center of most of our most famous superheroes in the comics, but yet in the movies it feels like we kind of throw aside the relationships and make them feel like something that's just not real. Like, the only kind of realistic portrayals of love I can think of in superhero movies lately is probably Tony and Pepper in the MCU, and another James Gunn project, Star-Lord and Gamora. I think this was an amazing story, and even though they didn't technically have the happy fairy tale ending, it was still just an incredible relationship that evolved over 3 movies and made you feel so connected to these characters. Because again, it's what makes characters relatable, especially when you're dealing with Superman, a guy that can do things that nobody else on the planet can do and is more powerful than almost anybody else. When you give him a relationship like this, regular people like me and you can connect to the character. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not really familiar with these actors' bodies of work. I've seen them both in a few very small minor roles that honestly is just not enough to judge them as actors. They look the part of the characters, I'll give them that, so I hope their chemistry is incredible, because it really needs to work for this movie to be great. Something I am kind of worried about in this movie, and I think they need to stay away from, is overshadowing Superman with so many other comic book characters in this film, because if you didn't know, these are all the confirmed characters in this. We have people like Guy Gardner, Hawkgirl, the Engineer, and so many more. And I really hope this movie doesn't feel like they're just starting to put in these other characters to be like, hey, look at the big universe we're about to have and all these characters you might see in the future. Because again, this is a big problem in current superhero movies, of setting up big things and then not paying them off. And plus, this really just feels like a lot of recognizable characters to put into your first solo entry into a brand new universe, and I hope it doesn't just feel like they're only in the film for comic book fans and the audience to like wink at their buddy and be like, hey, look at that guy, I recognize him. I think there's definitely a way that James Gunn can balance it that kind of builds up the new DCU universe as it stands, because as we know, we're kind of jumping into a universe that has existed for a long time, and a lot of these heroes have just been around. We're not going to be watching like the origins of every character. So I just hope James Gunn can handle all these characters in this new world that I know he's so excited to get on the big screen. I just hope he doesn't make the same mistakes as the DCEU, where we're like, oh, we're going to make a Batman and Superman crossover movie before we even get a Batman solo movie. Now this kind of feels very small in comparison to a lot of other things I've been talking about, but I want to get some of these smaller details into. First of all, we need the iconic ripping open a shirt and the Superman logo underneath at some point in this movie. Also, like I kind of touched on at the very beginning with the tone, but I want to get a little deeper into it, is I think we really need to focus on Superman just saving regular everyday people. Show me him saving a cat from a tree or a dog or something. We have years and years of damage to Superman's character through both Superman himself and things like the DCEU and all the spin-offs of Superman like Brightburn, Homelander, who yes, I think Homelander is an incredible character, but still him, Omni-Man, all these other evil versions of Superman, and that's like the new popular thing now. No, we need to hammer home, this is not your evil Superman, this is the OG, just good guy superhero Superman. I also really want this movie to really develop who Lois Lane is as a character on her own outside of just being like the girlfriend of Superman. I feel like this is a problem in a lot of Superman media. I think something like My Adventures with Superman does a really good job with the character of Lois Lane, because again, if you develop her on your own, then you care that much more for the couple of Superman and her and whatever adventures they get into or danger. I'm interested to hear what you guys think about all this, so let me know in the comments anything you do or don't want to see in James Gunn's Superman, and make sure to click above me to watch a video where I talk about everything I don't want to happen in Sonic 3.